Hello and welcome to the sewing studio. Today I'm going to show you how to make this lap quilt that's hanging behind me. I was recently asked to make a small lap quilt for somebody's father. So I chose these fabrics because he's very much into DIY and home renovation. So I chose fabrics, so we've got hammers and screws, and then we've got signs here that say home sweet home, wet paint, all sorts of signs to do with working. And this fabric is by Stoff and it's called a handy little fabric. So I chose 3 out of that range. One, as I say, was the signs, the other were the nails and screws, and the other were the hammers. And then I chose the Bella Solid fabric. So the grey is nickel, the plummy colour here is called mulberry, and the blue that I've used for a little border and binding is called American blue, and they are all in the Bella Solid range. So the first thing I did was I cut all of my fabrics, with the exception of the blue, which is the border. All of the others I cut into 5-inch squares. So the quilt behind me measures approximately 44 inches square. So I cut all of these into 5-inch squares. I wanted the mulberry colour to be the smallest piece, and I wanted the grey to be the longer pieces which frame our feature. So when you're doing a 9 patch, if you want your feature fabric to end up as the biggest piece, so if I show you here, you need to put that on your corners. So you make 3 rows. So you have a feature, a grey and a feature, and then you have a grey, and whatever your little centre highlight is going to be, that always goes in the centre of your 9 patch. So you create your 9 patches that look like this. So I've done 1 of each of the ranges, and then you cut them in half. And I've got a nice rotating cutting mat here because that makes life a bit easier. So I've got my 9 joined together. So this was 5 inches, it's now 4.5 because we've lost a quarter in our seam. So we need to cut that in half. So we're now going to cut it at 2 1/4. And what I do is I line the ruler up with 2 1/4 in that seam. And I cut straight up the middle. And then, because I've got a mat that turns, I haven't got to move my fabric. So I've ended up with my pieces looking like this. So I do that with all of my 9 blocks. So to lay the quilt out, we take our pieces and our little square here goes bottom left, top right, bottom left, top right, bottom left, and so on. And then the next row, we go the other way. So we go top right, bottom left, top right, bottom left. And we carry on laying that out in rows. And then we join each of these together to make 1 row. And then we do the same with the next row. And then we join all our rows together. So I'm just going over to the quilt behind me to talk to you about how it's all gone together. So your highlight square also comes down in a diagonal. And then I've used this Bella Solid, which is American blue, And so I've got a 1-inch border here all the way round. That was cut at 1.5 inches. And then in the steel grey, I've cut my border at 2.5 inches. So I've got 2 borders here. Again, if you wanted it to be bigger, you could just cut bigger borders. And then I've put this binding using the same American blue on my binding. Now, I deliberated long and hard about whether my binding should be the same as the highlight square, but I actually quite liked it echoing this border here. So my binding was cut at 2.5 inches. So you can see the quilting is my favourite wavy stitch, and I've done this in a variegated thread, so it goes light to dark, darker, light, medium grey, darker grey. So I've done that all over the quilt, and you can see how that shows through there on the black. And I've just got a light grey on the back. So the backing is steel grey, but that's the 60 wide Bella Solid fabric. So hopefully I've met the brief that this is a quilt for my friend's father. So as I always say, make this your own, have fun, and I look forward to seeing you next time here in the sewing studio.